It is time now for Money Power Politics. After weeks of unsuccessfully pressuring Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell to lower interest rates, it seems that Donald Trump is trying something new. In recent days, the White House has seized on a $2.5 billion renovation at the central bank's headquarters. Officials claim it has gone over time and way over budget, and alleging that Powell either lied to Congress about the project or grossly mismanaged it. If either is proven true, this could be used to give Trump legal cover to fire Jay Powell. In response to the accusations, Powell has asked the Fed's independent inspector general to review the entire renovation project. Let's discuss. I want to bring in former Wall Street banker turned journalist Bill Cohen. He's a founding partner at Puck, and Bharat Ramamurthy, former National Economic Council deputy director. Bharat, I turn to you first because you've been to the Fed's building. I've been to the building. It is a major, super swank renovation. But Powell sent a letter to the Senate Banking Committee about it and explained it in great detail. How vulnerable does this make him? Is this real? Is this a serious threat and opening for the president?
Well, yeah, as you know, a lot of this is about giving Donald Trump cause to fire Jerome Powell. So the statute that governs the Fed says that the Fed chair can't be fired at will, and that means at the discretion of the president, but can be fired for cause. And so the question is, what constitutes cause to fire somebody like the Fed chair? Now, that's actually not an issue where there's been a lot of legal analysis and litigation to date. But I think that what's clearly happening here is an attempt to build a legal case that Jay Powell has not done a good job overseeing this project and therefore should be fired for cause, which would then be held up in court. And I think that there is some vulnerability here. And I think that the request for the IG to go ahead and investigate this that Chair Powell made, I think is an acknowledgement that there is a little bit of vulnerability here. But to your point, what's going on under the surface here is that Donald Trump has a political problem. You know, he came to office promising to lower costs for people, and what's happened is that his own economic agenda has made it basically impossible for the Fed to lower interest rates. You know, Jay Powell has basically said openly that because of the threat of tariffs feeding through to higher prices, the Fed can't cut rates. That means that mortgage rates and credit card rates and small business loan rates are equal to or higher what they were when Donald Trump won, and that's a real problem for him, and he knows he's got to do something about that.
I get that. I get that he wants interest rates to be lowered, lower borrowing costs for us, for the U.S. government. But, Bill, does Donald Trump want to live without having a punching bag in the Fed? Right? If he replaces Powell with a yes man and doesn't get the dream economy, there's really nobody else to blame for its failures but himself. Right now, Jay Powell is a very convenient punching bag.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Stephanie. I mean, well, first of all, you'll have to remember, you know, we only have the best people in government, in cabinet, my cabinet, and that I've appointed in Washington, only the best people. And, of course, Donald Trump did appoint Jay Powell to be the Fed chairman, and now he's turned on him, as we've seen, relentlessly. And so he is looking for a pretext to fire him. He probably knows that he can only fire him for cause. And he's been very useful to Donald Trump as the punching bag. If he replaces him with Kevin Warsh, who's prepared to lower interest rates by 300 basis points, and we create a huge financial bubble as a result, as frankly happened during quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 from 2009 to 2022, you know, then Donald Trump is going to have another big problem because if the stock market crashes or the financial markets implode, was he going to blame his newly appointed Fed chair Kevin Warsh after, you know, finding some sort of ridiculous reason to get rid of Jay Powell, who he also appointed? So I don't see this, frankly, happening because I don't think it's a good enough reason. I don't think it's for cause that you fire the Fed chairman because there's cost overruns in the Fed building renovation.
Well, let's say Trump gets his way. Let's say he's able to replace Jay Powell with someone who does whatever he wants. Bharat, what would that mean for the U.S. economy, and how does our debt limit play into this? Because one of our biggest issues right now is how much it costs the U.S. government to service our debt. All we do is pay down interest. And given where interest rates are, it's hugely expensive. Lowering rates would make it less expensive, and that's a top priority for this president.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of good academic research on this, comparisons across countries, and what it consistently finds is that having an independent central bank that sets interest rates apart from politics is much, much better for your long-term economy. And the answer and the reason for that is very clear. Everybody wants to have lower interest rates in the short term. No president wants to preside over high interest rates. They want borrowing to be cheap. That stimulates the economy. That makes it easier for businesses to go out there and borrow money. And everybody's going to put pressure on a central bank to lower interest rates. I think what happens is that if you replace Jay Powell with somebody who is clearly doing whatever Donald Trump wants them to do, is cutting rates significantly, expectations about what inflation is going to do in the long run are going to spike, and that's going to create a real problem for the Fed in the long term. And as we also lived through in the Biden administration, people don't like high prices either. And so once you don't have the check of a central bank, which can raise interest rates as needed to curb inflation, you really start to raise the specter of runaway costs, runaway inflation over the long term. It makes the U.S. economy much less attractive for investors, both domestically and abroad.
Bharat, I want to cover a new topic. The White House is pointing to the inflation rate and saying, see, all this doom and gloom about tariffs was way overblown. People aren't that upset. But the Yale Budget Lab also points out that we have already seen a significant rise in prices for appliances, electronics, furniture, used cars. We now have another inflation report coming out tomorrow. How do you see all of this unfolding, Bharat?
Again, the case for cutting rates right now is basically non-existent. We are projecting at the moment 3% year-over-year core inflation. And as you know, the Fed's target is 2%. So we're still about 1% over target. And then on top of that, you have to layer in the uncertainty that the Trump tariff agenda is creating, which is certainly not going to lower prices. The question is, how much is it going to raise prices? It's certainly going to put upward pressure on prices. And you just had a new round of announcements, including a 50% tariff on Brazil, where we get a lot of things that we rely on: fish, meat, coffee, machinery for American manufacturers. All of that's going to be going up because if this tariff goes into place. So there's really not a strong case for cutting right now, especially given the fact that the labor market is hanging in there pretty well. Unemployment's still in the low fours. So again, this is the reality that Trump is facing. His economic agenda has basically made it impossible for the Federal Reserve to cut rates, which, again, in my mind, is the biggest political problem that he has, because when people voted for Trump thinking they were going to get lower costs, I think what they really meant was lower rates.
Well, a lot of folks aren't believing him anymore. Look at the tariffs. The markets at this point, Bill, are convinced that we've got Taco Trump. Trump always chickens out, that in the end, come August 1st, August 15th, September 1st, he's not actually going to impose these big tariffs. He's just stalling for deals, really, for himself. But the New York Times is reporting that a lot of countries negotiating with the White House suspect that Trump doesn't even want a deal. And this is just how he wants to block foreign goods from getting to the U.S. Do you think that's true?
Look, Stephanie, the best thing that's been happening in the financial markets for the last 4 months since Liberation Day is that he's Mr. Taco. He's a taco president. He chickens out. And I think the market is obviously factoring that in, believing that he's going to chicken out again come August 1st, and that, he's really just like a bad poker player, and they're not even taking him seriously anymore. They're not even coming to the table anymore to try to discuss these things. And I think he's lost complete credibility on the issue of tariffs because they make no sense to begin with. They're a tax on the American people. Of course, costs are going up at Walmart and Target and other places that rely on imported goods because he's slapped these ridiculous tariffs on them. So we're going to be faced with more inflation based on these rates. We're now tariffing Brazil, where it doesn't even make any sense because we have a trade surplus with Brazil. The truth is, Jay Powell has actually been doing a pretty darn good job navigating this plane, flying it through choppy weather with this president who's out to get him. And he's done a very good job, I think, all things considered, especially when you consider that the big, beautiful bill, which is now the big, beautiful law, is going to add $4 trillion to the debt. And of course, as a result of that, he's worried about more interest interest expense and budget deficits because he's added to the overall national debt in this ridiculous bill that we shouldn't even have.